Okay, good afternoon. Welcome everyone to Schools Forum. We'll get underway now, if we can, please. We are Cora, which is fantastic. We've had apologies from Thomas Goodridge, from Rachel and John Lake, which Forum's happy to accept the apologies. Yep.
And in addition to that, also apologies from Hayley Walker with Louise Danielchuk substituting.
Thank you, Louise. Okay, super. I'd like to welcome Paul McCahill, who's been appointed as the Diocese to Forum, and to our observers. And Sam, I think you're observing with a view to joining us in the future. Dan's resigned. Dan York has resigned as a maintained schools rep, but we're hoping he can be persuaded to join as an academy rep once they're finalised their academy academisation. Tracy's resigned as the academy special representative. Lee has resigned as a mainstream rep. Vanessa Bradley's no longer a member of Schools Forum. So we have got interests out there for the number of positions that we are recruiting to.
The position on academy special representation is better than the briefing notes would indicate, because the sector has identified Vicky Bond of Daventry Hill School as the new sector representative. So the Forum can welcome her from today.
Super, thank you. Are there any declarations of interest for items on the agenda that haven't already been declared?
Chair, not declaration of interest, just to follow on from that discussion. To maintain head teacher, I met with all the maintain heads last week and explained around representation here. I've had 2 heads reach out saying they'd like a bit more information. They would be keen to join. So I'll arrange briefings. Obviously, I'll do that through James as well, with a view to them joining in December, if that's okay.
Yep, perfect. Thank you.
Thanks.
If we move on to the minutes then, you've all had a copy of the minutes. Has anyone got any questions or issues with the minutes as they are drafted currently that they'd like to bring attention to? No? So I've got a couple of comments from myself. Just there were a couple of updates in there. We were going to look at, on the forward plan, an update to Section 19 of the Education Act. Is that in here, or is that something we'll do next time, another time?
Chair, that's okay. Bring that to December. As part of the December update with the outcomes of consultations, etc. We're just going through, there's been some challenge and some change around Section 19 requirements. So we're just going through that within the council now. I'd like to bring that here, if that's okay. Yep,
that's fine. The draft sufficiency strategy, we were, in the minutes, we were, I think, going to get an update on that. Is that included in the...
all of the SEND DSG deficit management plan, what I presented last time was an overview of that, which included the sufficiency work. And then the recommendation that I made last time is that I bring that back in February, once it's been through the formal governance process and been signed off. So I'm happy to bring that back. I'm happy to talk if there are specific questions about that today, but that will be, the detail of that will come back in all its detail in February.
No, that's fine. And there was one of the only other question I got was when we talked about the maintained schools who are holding balances just over 10%, there was essentially just wondered if there was an update on, we were looking at, they've got specific projects or things that they were saving for essentially, and whether we have a sight of what those are, and we're happy that that they are have a plan for those funds.
We're going through the process still of looking at the sort of 3-year plans with them and budget for this year. So we'll bring that back next time with more detail, but we don't have a report on it at the moment.
Yep, that's perfect. Okay. Is everyone happy to accept the minutes as they are then? Yep. Thank you. Yeah, sure. That's perfect. And we've obviously gone through the actions, the matters arising from that. So if I can ask Emily, do you want to take us through the rather grim reading that's the DSG monitoring statement and cheer us up
Yeah.
somehow?
Okay, thank you. The report outlines the West Northants DSG forecast outturn position as at period 4, which is July 2025 for the financial year ended 25-26. So just as a recap, we brought the prior financial year provisional outturn position, which went to Cabinet in June and Schools Forum in July. The prior year overspend across all 4 blocks of the DSG was 18.2 million, which equates to approximately 4% of the gross DSG budget and approximately 10% of the net DSG budget. So the cumulative balances that we're bringing forwards from prior year total of 21.5 million overall deficit balance, with 28.2 million on the high needs block. The current year, period 4 forecast outturn is an overspend totaling 31 million, with a forecast overspend on the high needs block totaling 32.1 million, which is offset by an underspend on the early years block. At the time of setting the budget, the gap between the high needs funding for the current financial year and the estimated cost of provision for SEND was 18.9 million, which results in an immediate pressure through a deficit budget. The remaining pressure between the deficit budget that was set and the current forecast total overspend is due to a number of factors, such as additional demand, which has arisen since the setting of the budget, particularly throughout Q4 of last financial year, and the resultant full year effect in the current year of those additional costs. We've also got demand above budgeted levels, increases in average RAS bands due to complexity of cases compared to budgeted amounts, and they're the key reasons. The main pressures that we're seeing are 10.5 million on the independent schools budget, mainly in independent special school places. So approximately half of this pressure is due to the previously mentioned 4-year effect of prior year demand, which has happened since the setting of the budget, and approximately half of that is due to growth above forecast levels. High needs top-ups to maintain schools is forecast to overspend by 3.3 million, which is mainly due to revised growth assumptions following a nearly 100% increase in plans in mainstream above the budgeted levels being experienced throughout the first quarter of the financial year. There are smaller variances and they're outlined in sections 2.22 and 2.23 of the report. The underspend on the early years block is currently forecast at 1.1 million, which offsets in part the overspend on the high needs block. There is a forecast underspend across the claims-based high needs inclusion fund and the disability access fund based on the current trends of claims experienced throughout the first 4 months of the year. There's also a forecast underspend on central expenditure as well. So the cumulative DSG balance position is currently estimated at 53 million at the end of this financial year.
Thank you, Emily. Can I open it up to forum colleagues for comments, thoughts?
Not sure I'll follow that, to be honest. I think Emily's given a really good overview. I just wanted to provide a bit of reassurance, if there is any, having listened to those numbers. We are not out of kilter at all with other local authority areas, particularly around the demand in SEND, which is driving most of the overspends at the moment. We've been doing some mapping work across the east of England. We've also worked with colleagues sort of nationally, and we are certainly not an outlier in terms of really high overspends at the moment. We are right in the middle of increases in demand, increase in complexity and cost. So the position that Emily's just outlined there is a very, very similar position to most local authority areas at the moment. And as I said, SEND is driving that demand and that cost. We are hopeful as a whole sector, certainly as a council, the education white paper that we are expecting this month will do something to address the current system, which we all know is broken. So it is the numbers that Emily has outlined. They're scary, they're worrying, but it's not something that is necessarily in our direct control, and we're certainly not an outlier. I just wanted to make that point clear. Chair, I know you sit in other groups, I know you'll see that, but just for everybody else.
Yes, I do. And it would be interesting to see when the white paper comes out, what, if any, ideas that are really going to help financially. I suspect it's going to be more around organisation. There's clearly a lot of money going out with our council and with others into the independent sector. And it would be nice to see some government control or regulation on charges for that. You know, when the independent sector has gone heavily into venture capitalists have invested in them, that there's money, they're doing that because they think there's a lot of money to be made there at the expense of children. So hopefully something will be done around that area which will help financially, but otherwise I think it will be the organisation of schools, which will put more emphasis on mainstream schools being fully inclusive, which they should be, and providing hopefully some financial support into there, but effectively removing them from the essentially from the SEN ranges from a funding point of view. I suspect that is the way that things are likely to be going, because the government hasn't any indication that it has any intention of investing significantly more into this area, only trying to regulate it better and set expectations. So we'll see when we've got the high needs update papers coming to those future meetings, what that looks like and what we're doing. And it obviously hasn't helped that the capital we thought we would have this academic year to be able to carry out more investment and set up more places was not forthcoming. And I'm sure that Ben, you and our councillor colleagues are lobbying government through the F40 group and others to try and make sure we get a settlement that allows us to make those improvements at a faster pace. Is there any comments anyone else would like to make on it?
Can I just ask, and this might be my understanding, the 1.1 million forecast underspend in early years will offset the overspend in high needs. Is there any way that that can be pulled back into early years so that that doesn't come through as an underspend?
So I think this comes up every year, unfortunately. Whilst the DSG give us the funding out in 4 ring-fenced blocks, when it's sort of given out, they look at a position in totality. So it's been really difficult to basically give out underspends to the sector as a result of the DSG regulations around that. So I think there's potentially some work being done on improving the claims-based take up for this financial year, but in terms of sort of almost dishing out that underspend, we're quite restricted, unfortunately, by the regs.
Bev, I think one thing there which Emily could probably clarify as well is proportion of the underspend relates to participation rates as opposed to having surplus money, because the staffing wasn't staffed to the level that we were hoping. Then there is a degree of, if I say proper money in there, as in a proper underspend, but some of it's down to lower participation, which will, well, I don't know, potentially be clawed back, but effectively it's not down to retaining money. Is that right? Hopefully something can be done about a portion of it, and I think that when we come to the consultation paper, it does talk about retaining which we're required to do, reduce the amount that's retained centrally for the 3 and 4-year-olds, and keeping it at the same level and not increasing it in any other age group. So to try and get that money out, which is a real benefit, as opposed to participation helps. The more children we've got in the nursery, that helps defray costs, but to a point.
Can I just ask what the early years sector are doing to increase participation and take up? Okay.
So some of the underspend work, underspend that's outlined in the current budget. In fact, there's some projects that will be starting around the Best Start in Life to look at working with family hubs, school improvement partners to meet our kind of targets around GLD for 2028. So there's a number of different projects that are looking at CPD programs, evidence-based programs, working with the university to start doing that early intervention work, and that strategy is going to outline some of that. So some of that will be absorbed by that. There is also the kind of parent-facing element, which is about communication and marketing to raise awareness of the kind of working entitlements, and a bit more targeted work, because our target levels or take-up levels for the 2-year-old disadvantage have significantly dropped over the last 2 years, from average 70% take-up to about 41%. So as part of some of that work is about working with family hubs and early intervention, about Citizen Portal being able to assist families to do those applications, so that we are reaching those more hard to reach communities, because that gap is getting bigger, and sort of concerted projects around looking at GLD. So we've focused on the areas and looking at the data around literacy, communication and language, in terms of physical kind of improvement around children. So there's lots of little projects that we're hoping to roll out as part of that kind of wider work. Paul touched a little bit on the sort of underspend around high needs funding and DAF. So DAF is ring fence, and that, so therefore we're not allowed to allocate that anywhere else. However, there's a couple of local authorities that have done some really good projects where they've employed staff within sort of benefit or family hub kind of sector to work with families to actually complete DLA applications. So I've just had that come through, and I've been working with the integrated service manager, Louisa Russell, to actually develop that application so that we can get the right families applying, because that application process is really long and complex. The right children get the funding. So we're a lot of the kind of next kind of stage of projects is about that integrated work, and that kind of end goal around 2028. So that's
Thank you.
Just with regards to sufficiency, sorry, you had some brilliant data previously that was in a table that was ragged, showing number of places required, available, and and the gap. Is that data that's going to be refreshed anytime soon?
We've just refreshed it actually as part of, there's lots of underlining projects even with the school-based nursery grants that the DFE are running. So we're using that same data, updating that data. Within the local authority, we were actually allocated early years expansion funding, capital funding, not a lot, but just under £1 million to develop additional places within the early years. So we've just completed round 2, and I'm just pulling that data together that will then update our sufficiency picture, which at the moment, I think 8 of our areas are RAG rated red. Hopefully that will have a little bit of an impact, but there is definitely an ongoing sufficiency issue. So we're doing some cross work with place planning around section 106 to be able to look at that kind of long-term planning, but that data will be refreshed and shared with the sector, and I'm happy to bring that as part of the paper for future reference, if that's useful. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that would be great. Thanks, to include those in future papers. Thank you. Is there any more questions at the moment around DSG monitoring? The only comment I've got before we move on with this is that it's obviously a very difficult position. Ben is right. The other neighbouring local authorities are in a very similar position, and as is Nationwide, and we'll wait and see how, if anything, that is impacted by the white paper or any budget announcements that come out towards the end of November. We have got to be mindful, though, that we do need to continue to support and are doing the children with additional needs. And that is reflected in the fact that the cost, unfortunately, and demand is outstripping. And we do need to make sure we are, which will come in with the sufficiency and the recovery plan that will come through late in February meeting. Look at what we are proactively doing to be able to manage the need and at an affordable cost. As we move forward, there will at some point there will be a deceleration in the number of in the amount of demand that there has to be. It can't keep increasing at the rates it has. And that might be in the next couple of years or slightly longer. But in the meantime, we have got these issues to manage and in the best way that we possibly can. And again, it's incumbent on schools to make sure they are doing everything they can to be fully inclusive. And I know that colleagues are in all cases. Okay, sorry, Ben, go.
Just to follow on from a couple of points you've made there, I completely agree with what you're saying. I'm very hopeful that the white paper does give us a direction that we can move forward in. That means we're all talking about the same challenge. What has been found nationally, and I couldn't agree more with some of the reports written around the reforms brought in 2014, those reforms have created an adversarial system that we are all in the middle of. They have set parents against schools. They have set schools against authorities. It feels like all of us against health. It's not healthy at all. Where we are in West Northampton, I hope people do recognise this. The decision making around that spend that is going up and up and up, we have put really tight governance around that. So at the moment, I'm the only person that can authorise any spend that goes above placing a child in a normal school. We hold a panel every week. We really scrutinise every penny that we spend. Our primary function is to meet the needs of children. That's why that overspend is happening. If we had to go the other way, I would just say no to everything and children would be in unsuitable provision or in nothing, but I might be able to report we're in nearly a balanced budget. I'm not willing to do that. But please be reassured that the spend is scrutinised to the nth degree. And if there are better, more cost-effective alternatives, we'll always use those. The other thing I just wanted to say, you mentioned F40 group. The exec committee of the F40 group is on Tuesday morning next week. Councillor Shaw and I will both be attending that. We are continuing to lobby for West Northants and for the entire sector to get fair and equitable funding for all local authorities. I know I've brought it here before. Child just over the border in Buckinghamshire receives 60% more funding than a child in West Northants with an EHCP. That is not fair. That's morally wrong. I am really hopeful that that is going to be addressed through the white paper, but we're going to have to wait and see. When the white paper is announced, I'm very happy to bring an overview of what that says, what it means for schools form. I'll bring that here as soon as it comes out. If that's December, obviously I'll bring that here in December. I'm happy that we'll all discuss what that means for all of us.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thanks. Yeah, thanks, Ben. Okay, are we happy to note the report? And if we are, I will ask, is Emily or Beth who's doing item 5?
I think that's me because I'm
Okay.
unexpectedly here today.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. This is the regular annual schools budget consultation for mainstream schools and academies. We bring it to Schools Forum members in draft to give you a chance to read it and to input into the text or to change the questions or information as you want to. And we've brought with us a few people from each of the sections so you can ask those kind of questions. And we have trade union reps here as well to talk about the dedelegation for facility time. So we are in the same position as we were this time last year, where we don't yet have the provisional allocations of our grants or the rates that we'll need to set the mainstream budgets. So what we've done for the overview of the local schools funding formula, the parts that we can change, I've added a bit of modelling in this year based on our current year's budgets, so that you can see the impacts of some of the things that we change locally from the national funding formula. So the block move that we normally do from the schools block to the high needs block, what the individual budgets would look like without that move, if that had been done for this current year. And I also have done a bit of modelling to look at the way that we balance the budget so that usually in most years we have to apply some kind of balancing mechanism because the grant that we're allocated doesn't quite cover the full national funding formula, as we have a tool to fill in. And when we're following that kind of legislative national funding formula, we find it costs more than the grant we're given, so we have to apply some kind of balancing mechanism. Normally we apply cap, which is also part of the tool, and the way the national funding formula would bring that into balance if that needed to. So we're kind of currently, and for the last few years, have been applying the cap, but this is to try and give alternatives, which isn't something we've really looked into in prior years. So then the other sections are following the same sort of headings that we normally look at. We're looking at the growth fund policy and the weighted average numbers that we add into that formula for new and growing schools and schools that take on classes that we ask them to within year. And Shazia's here to talk about that if anyone has any questions. We also look within this formula, this funding formula paper, at the dedelegations and what we're now calling the education functions. One of the dedelegations that we normally apply, one of the three, the school improvement grant, that's actually technically now moved to a different part of the legislation and is called an education function. So that wouldn't be subject to the Schools Forum members' decision, but we're still going to treat it as if it was and ask for a vote for information. So then, following on from that, we've got the consultation questions, which are in this paper. And if anybody wants to input and let us know of any changes, then we can do that. And then we'll go out to full consultation in November, bring it back to Schools Forum in December, and then make the decisions just ahead of us finding out what the grant settlement actually is.
Okay. Forum members, have you got any questions around the consultation as set out here for a minute? Okay. I've got a couple of things then. I'll mention from my point of view, looking at it there. One is on the growth funding, Shaz. I was just looking at the table on growth funding in relation to the rates proposed in the that will go to consultation. Which are good. They are an improvement. Have we benchmarked this against the average salary costs? So, for instance, for a teacher, the average salary costs nationally are coming out around 66 to 70,000 per teacher annually, and we are improving the rates. But do we do those benchmarks to make sure that when we are putting the rates in, that they are covering the costs? Was my first question.
Yeah, I would have to kind of discuss with Beth on that.
Yeah, it's not benchmarked, but it's the midpoint from a couple of years ago on the scales, teacher salary scales for primary and secondary separately. So they weren't inflated last year with the teachers' pay awards, which is, yeah, so that they'll be a bit lower in the midpoint now.
Yeah, that probably accounts for some of the difference there. Okay, and in the planned growth numbers, it will be helpful just to see how that looks. But can we confirm that where we have or a funding growth, that that growth is not at the detriment of the rest of the school's cohort there? So effectively, we're funding more places, leaving other establishments struggling for places.
Yeah, so I would say on the growth that we've significantly reduced the amount of growth funding payments to schools. And I think that there's been a reduction year on year over the last 4 years. And particularly where schools are taking higher numbers and they're at those higher numbers now in all year groups, we don't provide more growth funding in order to stabilise the system. We do more accurate forecasting. So we try to aim for a 4% surplus capacity position at the start for secondary schools at the start of year 7, similar for primaries. And I know it impacts on some schools that are undersubscribed, but we do have to also allow for a sufficiency of places up to year 11, which is where I understand a conversation might be had around falling roles, to see how that might look against growth funding and also supporting those schools where they have to carry a surplus, particularly where SCAP can demonstrate that those places are needed in future years. So yeah, so we are trying to reshift things so that it's fairer to all schools.
Super, that's lovely, thank you. Another question, the other question I got, and I'm not sure if I've missed it, so apologies if I have, but there are, the opposite side of that is obviously starting to become more of an issue in terms of falling roles, particularly in rural schools, more so than elsewhere necessarily. Are we consulting on whether we would likely put a falling roles budget in? It's something Schools Forum in the past have looked at and not felt it was appropriate because it can be managed through, it should be managed through the lag funding and being able to right size. But given the way the demography is kind of working with over a period now, starting to see a drop off in places, is a falling roles fund something that you would like to consult on?
So you've got 2 categories of schools that might benefit from falling roles. So those schools, particularly in the areas you mentioned, village schools, where our forecasts show that they are going to continue to carry surplus capacity over the next 5 to 7 years, for those schools, it would be beneficial to seek a reduction in PAN so they can manage their numbers, manage their revenue costs. For schools that are, say, for example, within Northampton town, where they have a drop in numbers, but we're forecasting over the next 2 to 3 years that there will be an increase in numbers, for example, due to new housing that's coming forward. I think a falling role fund would benefit those schools because we wouldn't want them to reduce their PAN. We just want them to hold their surplus, but we're recognising that's difficult without some financial recompense. So yeah, I think it's a policy that needs to be developed that could work, but the parameters on it would be quite limited.
Yes, and I think, Beth, the DFE have, a year ago, they started to introduce more falling roles fund, but within quite strict priorities. You got to see the, you expecting within, I think it was a 2-year, might be 2 to 3 year period, them to return to capacity. So it's just holding capacity.
And we do have that. So for example, in Northampton town, we're showing that for the next 2 years, there will be a slight dip, but after that, that number is going to increase because of all of the SUEs that are coming forward, all of those large scale housing developments, which will become occupied. And so that would be a scenario that fitted in with the DFE's requirements. But for schools that have a falling role situation, because less so because of birth rates, but more because of affluent areas and younger families not being able to afford to buy, and that resulting in a falling role situation, we'd seek to agree a reduction in PAN for those schools.
Okay, so I guess the question then is, do we want to try and put something in the consultation just to pick up so that we can have a discussion in December on whether we put in for the following academic year?
Between now and then, we can work out what that might look like and whether it's worth going ahead with it, if Ben agrees. Yeah.
Okay. Super, thank you.
Chair, can I just clarify, just so, because we've brought the draft consultation here today, I think what we've just agreed, we are going to add another question in there around a falling roles fund with those parameters in, and we'll link it back to the document that the DFE have issued. So short term, fall, and then to bounce back up, not short-term for consistently falling roles in those areas. That's fine. We're happy, we're very happy. We'll add that question into the consultation. I think that's the right thing to do.
Yeah, no, that'd be great. Thank you. And I think that then gives us the ability to make a decision in December. Should the consultation come back and say, yes, we think that's something we'd like, colleagues would like to see. Okay, super. Are there any other questions around that for the moment? Okay, well, we'll move on to the delegation, shall we? Do you want to just briefly chat through?
So we have the two de-delegations, the trade union facility time and the redundancy funding that maintained schools can apply to if they're restructuring when they're in financial difficulty. So there are specific rules around that. Usually that's the redundancy fund has a small underspend, but it's a very small budget now because our numbers of maintained schools are very small, and so it wouldn't actually take more than one very large reorganisation to wipe it out fully in year. So we're not proposing reducing the rates. We'd just like to continue the rates and keep that small budget there. The school improvement grant that's now moved into the education functions section of legislation. So on page 17 of the document, you'll see there that we're again, we've built in a large underspend, and we're giving an option of the same rate as in the prior year. So we have quite a large underspent carry forward built into that for the current year, which we're forecasting will be underspent for the next year as well. But again, because there are plans in progress, there are committed sort of ideas for that funding, we don't want to reduce the rate. Then the facility time, which is the one where academies buy into, and that has been our saving grace this year because it looked, when it was just maintained contributions, it was becoming very unaffordable. But fortunately, with a lot of hard work from the union reps and also human resources HR got Rose on the line, more academies have bought into that, and so financially we're slightly better, well, a lot better than we thought we'd be at this point this time last year. However, we know that the costs are going to increase. We know that there's staffing increases, costs, and so there are two options being proposed, one with the same rate and one with a higher rate that recognises the teachers' pay award of 4%.
Okay, thank you. So at this stage, have forum members got any questions on those areas? Richard?
Sorry, Beth, can you remind us what the rates are, cost per pupil, for option 1 and option 2?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Obviously the purpose of looking at this today, this time, is to look at the consultation questions to make sure that we're happy that the consultation reflects the right wording and the right questions going out. So the decisions will be based in December on the consultations coming back and forums members' views of whether they follow the consultations or to what extent we do. Is there anything, Richard or Elaine, you would like to add in? If you looked at the consultation questions, are you happy that they reflect the consultation that we we have give a fair representation? Is there, sometimes in the past, we've also added in, I think, a sheet into the consultation that kind of outlines the benefits of the D-delegations and working with them. Is there anything you'd like to?
I think
to
this
add
gives
in?
the opportunity for people to add any further questions to us, whether in terms of information, what they want to know. First of all, I want to say thank you to the Schools Forum for the past. Last year, we had a significant jump in premium, which you agreed. It did result in reduced facility time for us. And I think the option now is whether we continue with that reduced facility time or with option 2 to increase the option of the increased facility time as it was in 2023, 2004. And of course, you'd expect me as a person that works with the union to push for option 2. I'm glad that you referred to the fall in roles budget earlier. The unions do acknowledge that budgets are tight. They've always been tight, but with falling roles in schools, the costs still remain the same. The income is reduced, the costs remain the same and also increase. We also don't want to be in the position of another local authority that gets to the end of primary school and realises they haven't got any secondary school places to fill them should the numbers increase. So I think your line of bringing back things to normal is important. But we do need to know that puts strain on our staff and our members, both as teachers and as support staff. When budgets are tight, jobs are lost or amalgamated, there's more work, there's more pressure being put on our staff, and therefore that has consequences, really, and consequences of illness, time off, potential early retirement, mistakes, safeguarding mistakes, which nobody wants to see. So part of the delegation budget is so we can be involved in informal stages before things progress to formal processes, which nobody wants. There is an issue which Rose, bless her, I must be the bane of Rose's life, really, because at every meeting I say, well, actually, there's different policies from different HR providers. The unions actually are the only ones that provide a constant voice through the differences between the HR policies of the local authority, which we are part of. We are part of that subgroup, but different HR providers should consult with us about their changing policies, and not all of them do. I think that is a high risk for the local authority to take because they remain the employer, and therefore they may be have actions against them on a policy that they know nothing about. So just to recap, we're aware of the reduced interest rates and low budgets. We're aware of the cost of HR provision that schools have to pay out. We are aware that a head teacher is in a dilemma. They would rather have a support staff substitute for a teacher in a class because the children know them than pay for an agency staff at high costs where the children don't know them. And so the head teacher really does have a dilemma to choose from. We want to support them in that decision, but obviously we need to ensure that support staff are supported in the right pay and conditions. Teachers are being asked, because of that, being asked to cover more than one class. We know that there's a backlog with the HCPs, and I do recognise Ben's work in actually getting that addressed now in the next 3 months or so, so thank you for that. There still remains a difficulty in retaining good staff and recruiting staff. And obviously in future, there's still going to be the implications of the employment bill, which is still going through Parliament, and obviously the actions of what will be in the future, the SSMB, the School Support Staff Negotiating Body. You've had all the risk assessment, the impact assessments and information in front of you. I'll just pass on to Elaine to see if she wants to add any further to that. and we can take any further questions that people want to know from the forum.
Yeah, only to add, I mean, thank you, Richard, that's very comprehensive, but reflecting some of what you said already about the increase in special needs, that obviously, and the provision for that can lead in some cases. I'm obviously representing teachers and support staff where you've got poorly qualified staff in a situation that can potentially be dangerous. You've got children, dysregulated children and so on, and we pick up the pieces from that. So there is an increased workload. All of these things can suggest an increased workload, and we are there. You know, our facilities days are listed, but believe me, our hours go way beyond that. So I am here because it's a facilities day today. I haven't been given permission by my head teacher. I'm going back to school on Thursday. But in the meantime, I am going to still be taking phone calls till God knows what time at night to address those issues. And this isn't just to circumvent or to prevent things going to a formal level. It isn't just members that are ringing us up to try and resolve this. We get calls from head teachers and we get calls from HR providers who want us to help sort something out informally, so it never goes to that. So I'm just emphasising that what we do, whatever it costs, we are saving money all the way through to stop things getting more complicated, to stop having to get people negotiated out, or to prevent people having to leave with some kind of injury or with some kind of claim against the school. This is what we are doing all the time to try and prevent this happening. And that's possible because we're local, we work locally. I work in a local school in West Northamptonshire. We go around to, well, I'd say we probably get to more schools than most other people. And, you know, that's a real privilege as well, but it also helps. Being known as that local person, I think, is something that you would want to maintain. It's really useful.
Thank you. Has colleagues got any more questions or observations? Otherwise, are we happy with just the one amendment around the falling roles for the consultation, the wording and the consultation questions to go out as is? Yeah, I'll take that as agreement. Thank you. Yeah.
So I'm bringing the early years funding 2026-27 consultation document, and it's in regards to as part of our statutory duty, we're meant to consult with early years providers on seeking views for the implementation of the base rates and supplements for the PVI sector, childminders and school-based nursery provisions and maintained nursery schools. As Beth has kind of outlined, there's a delay in the provisional DSG announcement, and that also includes the early years block. So for that reason, we're not able to give any kind of indicative kind of modelling figures on the rates for 2026-27. But what we're seeking is school forum to agree the kind of overarching principles for going to consultation for the WNC early years rates for 2026-27. We hope to get the information by mid-December, but as we did last year, I think that's quite late. So we're seeking to kind of go with the principles in order to go to consultation in November over a 4-week period in order to be able to publish rates early in January, give the sector enough time to plan around that. There aren't significant changes to this, but the proposals really, they're in line with last year, but as Paul, you outlined earlier, we are proposing to reduce the pass-over rate for the 3 and 4 year olds to the same as the 2s and under 2s to 97%. And this was outlined in the operational guidance by the DFE in 2025-26 that they anticipated local authorities to follow suit. So we're kind of preempting that really. Additionally, we are carrying out some modelling work, but we've not got a lot of trend data at the moment, so it's really challenging at the moment. So what we're asking for is some feedback from people around the table, if there's any additional questions that they'd like us to ask as part of the consultation, but in many ways it's quite straightforward. on the key principles, which is to stick to the 97% for the 2 and under 2s, increase the passover rate to 97% for the 3 and 4-year-olds, continue with the deprivation supplement for just 3 and 4-year-olds, and that's set out by DFE's guidance, and to seek views on increasing the existing incentive hourly rate by £2 hourly rate to £12 from the existing £10. So that's the kind of main changes, and they're not really significant. I'm not sure if anyone's got any specific questions that they'd like to ask me or in regards to that.
It's fine.
Just one question from me. Now that we've got the working families funding from 9 months, should we be asking to try and ascertain if there's an appetite to put that deprivation benefit in for all age ranges?
So that's a really good question, and I'm happy to consider that. I think when the deprivation rate that's within this kind of document is what's the kind of mandatory one. And I think in the last consultation, we asked that question to introduce a deprivation rate for all age ranges, but it was unanimously sort of disagreed in terms of consultation. But we're happy to add that into this consultation if you feel that it's worth revisiting. So it was just the feedback that came back from the last consultation. It was quite a strong no because of the impact it has on the base rate. And at the time, as you recall, we hadn't taken the top slice from the under 2s and 2-year-olds. We were introducing that. That would have meant that the base rate would be even lower. So I think it's worth asking, and I'm happy to include that in the consultation. I think it's a good call. I think it's something that I would welcome, but I was just going on the basis that the last consultation was really strongly against the introduction of a deprivation rate for under 2s and 2-year-olds.
Yeah, I think I'd just add to be cautious about it because obviously we're from one of those areas of deprivation who didn't benefit because, we lost that cut. And I think because there's such a high volume of early years providers out of those deprivation areas, I think people will understandably vote for themselves or respond on their own merit rather than looking at the benefit for the whole area. So yeah, I think I would operate caution.
I understand. Yeah.
So I don't know how we would get around that then, would we? Because we're in area of deprivation as well. So we obviously didn't benefit from that. I think I would like to see the question asked again, because now we've got a better understanding of what the new funding looks like and what that's done with our interest levels and participation levels. And also with the pass through moving from 96 to 97%, there is, we would hope, more money there now to spend on. And I know sitting here this time last year, it was new news, wasn't it? It felt new news that we were going to be losing hourly rate. So that felt really impactful. We shouldn't see that this time, should we? We should see an increase in all areas. So I think it's worth asking the question again, because the landscape looked quite different.
I'm happy to include that.
And even put some examples in about what the rate's going to be, so people do know to an extent. I think that would help.
So the only challenge with that, Eliza, is not knowing what I think that's really.
I was going to add that as well, that one of the reasons we have this underspend in the early years is because 18 months prior to getting our final grant allocation, we've had to estimate what will be the outcome at that point in time, and adding more kind of estimates into the calculation makes it more likely to vary. But our aim
Or
is to
about
get it
making
all
people
out
aware that they're not going to
once.
lose because we've got the 97% rather than the 96. I think that needs to be clearer in the consultation.
And there is
That will-
also the change that it won't be based on the January censuses anymore. Going forward for next year, it will be based on the termly head counts. So it'll be much closer, we hope, relationship between the grant and the claims.
Yeah, and we've done it with the main budgets where we've put the table together saying we don't know what next year's rates will be, but this is what it would look like based on the current rate. So that move, so I guess we can model it, say this is what you currently got. This is particularly with that increase in distribution to the 97%. This is essentially what it would look like if we then put in this deprivation funding. This is what it would look like. So it's clear that people can see that based on the current rates, how it affects the money that they receive, whilst acknowledging that we don't know by how much those rates will change. I want to say increase, but nothing's a foregone conclusion, is it, in this world? But hopefully, you know, that's what it would have looked like. Hopefully we can do that. That just gives a bit more of a visceral representation for consultees.
On that note, with hoping it's an increase, with the rates not being issued in July, I'm expecting them in December. And I seem to remember last year they came out the night before Schools Forum, didn't they? So we might do that again this year. Are we expecting, is that a good thing, do we think, what they're reviewing? I mean, particularly for maintained nursery schools, selfishly here, of the central government actually looking at the funding they're giving to maintain nursery schools?
If they're looking at everything, I can't tell you it's a good thing. I genuinely don't know, and I wouldn't want to give any sort of false hope at all. What I can say is that everything in the world of education funding is currently being looked at, and there are all sorts of conversations between Department for Education and Treasury about how education is properly funded. What's going to come out in settlement and in white paper, etc., we just don't know at the moment, and I think it would be dangerous to try and speculate on what we think might come. Let's take it as a positive. It's being looked at.
I mean, but the only thing I would say is they are asking, you know, we usually have one main head count and we have got termly head count. So they're really assessing kind of what take-up trends look like in order for local authorities to be able to benefit, so that we can pass out the, you know, what the best kind of rates to setting. So that's got to be a positive. I think additionally, the Best Start in Life strategy does outline in its kind of narrative, not in numbers, but that the government is looking at supporting high quality inclusive practice and provision, and recognises that recruitment and retention is a massive issue for us within the early years and kind of the education sector. So I'm hoping that translates into something that will benefit the sector. But at this stage, I'd be in agreement with Ben that we can't really stipulate exactly what that looks like.
Okay, are there any more questions on this? Okay, thank you. So, yeah, if we can just add something in around that table, and then I think the consultation form, I'm happy for the consultation to go on that. So the next agenda item, forward plan.
Thank you, Chair. This is essentially as set out on the agenda, with the addition of various reports back that were mentioned earlier in the meeting. Clearly, the February meeting is the high point, is the most meaningful one of the year, given that it's when the forum carries out its decision-making role. No, sorry, the December meeting, I mean, is when the forum carries out its decision-making role in relation to schools and early years budget proposals. Otherwise, happy to take any questions.
Super. Other than those, a couple of things that are added in that we talked about early from the minutes in terms of the section 19 and the update on the recovery plan, which will go in slot into these meetings. Is there anything anyone else feels needs to be on here? There's obviously always a case for any urgent business that comes along to go in, but based on what we know, are we happy with the forward agenda?
Sorry, are we going to do some work at some stage about forecasting numbers and what that looks like and place planning over the next 5 years? Because I know you mentioned it at the head, so I think it's really important that the Schools Forum we're aware of what the trends are looking like and how be a bit more forward planning.
Yep.
Chair, I can't say we. Shazia has done a bucket load of work behind the scenes as always. Shazia has produced what I think is a really, really detailed and accurate school organisation plan, which forecasts all of future numbers 5-10 years in advance. We are finalising that. It's going through very last sort of dotting I's, crossing T's. The intention then is we share that with everybody. It should help all of us look forward in terms of business planning, etc. I'm very happy to bring an overview of that through Schools Forum in terms of what that could lead to in pressures in particular areas, not for individual institutions, but particular areas. I'm more than happy to bring an overview of that. Sorry, that's me volunteering you to do more work for Shazia. No, just to give that overview of planning area and what that means for all of us, I think that would be a helpful thing to do. Happy to table that in December or February, whenever is the right time, because I know we've got a lot to get through in December.
Yeah, but February,
Yeah.
probably February, I think, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think
Can
that's time.
Can I just add to that? What we're trying to do is to include all of the housing that's coming forward within each planning area. So where there's a primary site reserved, I know that's causing some concerns amongst schools that are undersubscribed.
Yeah.
And our position on that. So whether we go ahead with that school because there is future demand, or whether we go back to developers and say, we don't need that school. Hardingston is an example of a school which is surrounded by about 5 different developments, and Hardingston has reduced its PAN. So we're not just looking at capacity below PAN, we're looking at the actual physical capacity of a school, and whether opening a new school would destabilise existing schools. So that will all be within the school organisation plan. And as Ben said, we can provide an overview of that, so schools are all clear on what the future landscape looks like. Yeah.
That'd be great, thanks.
Sorry, can I just ask whether that includes early years provision in the schools focus?
So I'm due to meet with Rahana. We've got a meeting scheduled in for next week, haven't we? So the plan is to include early years sufficiency, SEND sufficiency, and then to bring in post-16. So you've got everything from 2-year-olds right up until 19 in one document, but they are within the second and third phases. So right now it's statutory school age, then we add in SEND sufficiency, which I think is due to be completed by Jan. Yeah, so that will go in, and then early years, which a lot of the work has already been done, but it's just bringing it in. So within that document, you should have everything in one place. Yeah.
Chair, is it for the December meeting, is it worth putting on the agenda a review of education white paper in the hope that we have it by then? And we can always take it back off again.
Yeah.
And let's be ambitious and let's be confident, and we will have that. And I'm happy to work with you outside of here to give an overview from, obviously from your perspective and from
Yeah.
a council perspective.
No, I
as well.
think that would be very helpful. And I suspect that it will come out on or around the budget. So hitting up against the next meeting, but hopefully it will be around there. Super. Okay, so with those things added in, that's great. I haven't been advised of any other urgent business. So unless anyone has got anything else they want to run through, I'll close the meeting. Thank you all. Thank you all for your participation.